Hey everyone, today I'll be presenting on the role of brothers and sisters in the gender development of preschool children. So our book defines gender as the collection of psychological and behavioral traits that differ between males and females. Evolutionarily, this is generally determined by factors such as, everyone's smiling at me, this is awesome. This is generally determined by factors such as differential parental investment in offspring, and sexual division of labor. Ontogenetically, this is largely determined by influences of the family, specifically parents and siblings, which is what we'll be talking about today. And this picture is, I think I'm wearing the same suit coat actually. Me at my brother's wedding, I was the best man, and I was interested in this study because my brother has had a huge effect on me in my life in terms of sports that I like and music that I listen to. And you will see that the study focuses on children that are aged at 3 years old. And my brother's 14 years older than me, so by the time I was in grade school, he was already off at college. And around that age, the 2, 3, 4-year-old range is when I got a lot of influence from him. Studies in this area began around in the 1950s. The first big paper was published in 1956. And since then, throughout the 70s and 80s, and pretty much until the 21st century, there are a lot of problems with a lot of these studies. A lot of them had small sample sizes. A lot of them use assessments that weren't proven to discriminate between boys and girls. For example, one study, the teacher just ranked all the boys in her class from most masculine to least masculine, all the girls in the class most feminine to least feminine. And I think that's just a ridiculous way to measure that, especially with a school teacher who's only known the children for, in the study said, 6 to 9 months. Also, there are confounding variables such as multiple siblings, sex of siblings, and birth orders. For example, how do you measure the difference in a child with 2 older brothers and 1 older brother, or even a child that has 1 older brother and 1 older sister? And also, none of these studies had a control group, and by that I mean none of them studied children who had no siblings at all, for comparison. Before I begin talking about the paper, there's some acronyms you guys should know. One is ASPAC, which was a geographic population study that studied 14,000 mothers and their children, beginning at pregnancy and following the child throughout their development. And this has also occurred in England. And the PSAI, which is a huge part of this, I'll get to it later, stands for the Preschool Activities Inventory, and it's an assessment of gender-type behaviors. And it's pretty much a questionnaire that the mother filled out when the child was 3 years old. For the study, Rust and his team took all ASPAC children, so out of the 14,000, they took all the children that had either no sibling or 1 sibling, and the older sibling had to be age 12 or younger, and the reason for that is because if children who are 12 or younger were still in the same school, they're still in primary school. I'm not sure how the school system in England works, but I guess it goes to 12 years old. So he ended up getting samples of 1,027 girls with siblings, 1,143 boys with siblings, 1,665 singleton girls, and 1,707 singleton boys. And I would like to mention now that these, compared to previous studies on this topic, these numbers are completely unprecedented. Bigger than, probably by a power of 10 larger than any other studies before. So the Preschool Activities Inventory, or the PSAI, is a measure of childhood gender development, and it identifies variations in general behavior. And it's a questionnaire, and there are 24 items, and it's based on a 5-point scale from never to very often. So the first category is toys, of which there are 7 items, and this is taken directly from a very legally obtained copy of the questionnaire. And the mother had to answer, please answer these questions according to how often the child played with the following toys during the past month. And each of these 7 toys would be answered from never to very often. The next category was activities, which was 11 items, and the mother had to answer the question, please answer these questions according to how often the child engaged in the following activities during the past month. And again, she would range from never to very often. And the last category is characteristics, in which the mother had to answer the question. Please answer these questions according to how often the child shows the following characteristics. And again, never to very often. Now to get the results, the team took all the male type answers, subtracted by the number of female type answers, and performed a statistical transformation to where you get a PSAI score. And all you really need to know is the higher the PSAI score, the more masculine the child is. So to help you read this table here, these are ordered by boys and girls, and the three categories being older brother, singleton, and older sister. So right here we have boys. So there are 561 boys with an older brother, and the mean PSAI score was 65.26. Likewise, there were 1,707 boys that are singletons, and their mean score was 62.52. And so on and so forth. And this is the resulting graph, which you'll see is directly from the book. And we'll see here that boys who are in blue, boys with an older brother, are more masculine or exhibit more masculine type behaviors than singleton boys, who in turn exhibit more masculine type behaviors than boys with older sisters. Conversely, girls who are in orange here, you'll see exhibit more feminine type behaviors than singleton girls, who in turn develop more feminine behaviors than girls with older brothers. And I'll also mention here that on first glance, when I saw this graph, I said, well, these differences aren't really that big at all. They're pretty minor. But one thing to note is, as I mentioned before, the sample sizes for this study were huge, and made these differences statistically significant and viable. So the conclusions are: children who had an older sibling of the same sex were more gender typical than singletons, and children who had an older sibling of the opposite sex were less gender typical than singletons, therefore concluding that older siblings act as gender role models. As I mentioned before, this topic is still really in its infancy in terms of studies coming out. As I mentioned, the first study was in 1956, and throughout just until the 21st century are people really starting to pay attention to this. And there are a lot of aspects of this dynamic that I'd really like future research to explore. One being households with multiple siblings. So if I had two brothers, would that make me more masculine? Or if I had an older brother and an older sister, would that make me act like a singleton, and so on and so forth? I'd also like to see correlations with age difference between siblings. For example, my brother is 14 years older than me, but he still had a huge effect on my life. Would he have had more of an effect if he was 4 or 5 years older than me, or if he was 1 or 2 years older than me, or if he was my twin? There's been absolutely no studies on twins yet. Additionally, gender development at different stages. So most of the studies at this point have been focused on preschool children and younger children. Do these effects persist into the middle school years and the high school years, and even into the adult years? There haven't been any studies on that. And lastly, the effect of younger siblings. What kind of effect did I have on my brother? I'm sure many of you have younger siblings. What kind of effect did they have on you compared to the effect that you had on them? And thank you very much for listening to my presentation.